Chapter 1155. The wind outside the window was strong. The lights outside were on, and the shadows of the gangsters could be vaguely seen. There were only two people in the military uniform. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. There was a pleasant smell on her lips. It was light with a hint of sweetness. It was like a lotus flower in a quiet valley. It slowly lingered from the tip of his nose to the side of his ears. Even when she was doing something, there was a smile on her lips. When she turned her body slightly, her face was beautiful but her aura was clear. Her shirt was pulled open a little. It was loose after all. Her fair collarbone could be seen clearly. What was worse was that she had already reached out her hand. As she moved, her collar drooped even more. He could vaguely see the small lace under the bandage. It was just for a moment. Chin Mo's gaze darkened completely. His Adam's apple moved, and he held her wrist with extreme heat. He didn't push her away, because he couldn't push her away anymore. The smell on her body was like incense lit in the night. It was light but alluring. In the darkness, the temperature kept rising. Bojio felt as though all the energy in her body had been sucked out, because that face was too mesmerizing. And his deep and husky breathing beside her ear. It was so oppressive that it was magnetic. The breath beside her ear made her whole body go numb. Not to mention where his hand was placed. Brother Mo. She opened her mouth. He interrupted her. He looked into her dark eyes. The color was bottomless and a little hot. Didn't you say you would help me? Bojio could hear his heartbeat. It was heavy and loud. Even his breathing was different from usual. You can do whatever you want to me. His words seemed to be enticing her. But this kind of enticement was easy to get addicted. No one would have the chance to see Chin Mo like this. He pressed against her head. In order to get her. Even his aura was chaotic and noble. It was the most bewitching. Especially when he looked at her like that. His black hair hung down. Even the corners of his eyes were filled with viciousness. When his fingers tightened, he looked like an extremely handsome devil. She couldn't resist at all. Her whole body would heat up even if it was just this appearance. Accompanied by his deep and heavy breathing, the sound of his heartbeat would be amplified. They were so close that she couldn't retreat even if she wanted to. He held her hand in his palm. The temperature of his fingertips was like ice, but it was also different. Because that handsome face, which had always been indifferent and noble, was now tainted with something else. Bojio felt an inexplicable dryness in her throat. She couldn't handle the Almighty at all. Hey Brother Mo, that's enough. Bojio's wrists started to ache as she spoke. Chin Mo arched a brow and glanced at her, his voice slow. Obviously not enough. Bojio lowered her voice. It's good for your health. It wasn't much at first. Chin Mo leaned closer to her ear. It was all because of a certain someone's promise to help me. Bojio tilted her head, her ears slightly red. Isn't 40 minutes enough? You should know this the best. At this point, Chin Mo laughed. In the night, his voice was very alluring. After all, you were once a beneficiary. Bojio didn't say anything. She had lost completely in this aspect and couldn't get back at him. Chin Mo's gaze dimmed for a moment before he suddenly pushed her away. Bojio sat up. Where are you going? Take a cold shower, idiot. With that, Chin Mo entered the bathroom again. Bojio glanced up at the ceiling, waiting for the heat to subside. When the tip of her nose touched the pillow, she could still smell the musk on the Almighty's body. She closed her eyes and couldn't help but open the window. The night breeze blew in, extinguishing the temperature in the room. When Chin Mo walked out, he saw the scene. He frowned and carried her up, throwing her back onto the bed. Do you want to freeze to death? The water from his hair dripped onto her eyelids. She blinked and was about to use her hands to rub when someone pressed her down. The next moment, she felt the touch of a towel. It was very light. Again and again. Those who didn't know better would have thought she was a porcelain doll. I was too hot just now. That was the first thing she said when she opened her eyes. Chin Mo's fingers slid past the corner of her eyes. You were complaining about the cold just now. It was hot after that. Bojio didn't think much when she said this. Chin Mo chuckled, his fingertips touching her lips. It was unclear what he meant. After that, she really couldn't drive as well as the Almighty, especially in this aspect. Bojio closed her eyes, pretending that the demon in front of her didn't exist. However, the slight coolness between her lips still made her heart beat faster. This time, the Almighty was dressed especially tightly. Even his military jacket was tied neatly. When the cloth pressed against her chest, it felt a little itchy. Bojio moved uncontrollably, but the man held on to her waist, his breath following. Is it still hot? MMH. In certain aspects, the person in his arms was especially direct. She had a temperament that was in between a youngster and a young lady. Chin Mo exerted more strength, pulling her into his arms. His deep voice rang in the night, extremely magnetic. Let me help you this time. Bojio wanted to say no, but who would be able to resist his methods? When the bandage was removed, Bojio's head was already swollen from the dizziness. Her heart was thumping wildly in her chest. Sometimes Chin Mo was right. There weren't many people like Bojio. When her thin lips opened, it was like a drug, making one want to lock her in his arms and break her completely. But Chin Mo didn't forget that they were in the military. The time and place weren't right. He tried his best not to look at her, but when she wrapped her arms around him, it was as soft as porcelain, reminding him how fragrant it was. He had tasted it before, tasted it without any restraint. Because of this, he felt that the sound that came to his ears was too alluring. It was so subtle that it seemed like it could emit a fragrance. She was in his arms, leaning against him so softly. When she raised her head, the faint mole under the moonlight shone faintly. All of this clearly fell into his eyes. She was like the seductive woman in his dreams. Under the thin layer of sweat, she was like a demon from the bottom of the sea, giving off an extreme beauty. That was the original sin. No one could escape. And he had never intended to let go. This person could only be his. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed, his thin lips moving slightly. Chapter 1156. Bojio stilled. The coldness on his thin lips calmed her down. He held her chin, his entire body close to hers. There was still the smell of smoke, but it was very faint. She wanted to tilt her head, but he reached out, wrapping his hand around her short black hair, pressing it behind her head. The tip of his tongue probed. After such a gentle and delicate kiss, even her breathing was messed up. She sucked until her entire body was numb, her mind blank. Until everything was over. That was when she realized that her clothes had been pulled. The heat against her body hadn't subsided. But after she stopped him, he stopped. That person stopped moving, then smiled and said in a low voice, "Feeling good?" Bojio didn't say anything. She felt that it was blasphemous to do such things to the Almighty in his military uniform. She wanted to move, but he pressed her into his arms, his entire body cold. Do you really want me to go crazy? Close your eyes and sleep. That's the first option. The second option, I'll pack you up and chase you away. Little princess, Bojio thought to herself. He had already stood up. He probably couldn't sleep, so he walked over to his desk. Then he took out a pack of cigarettes from the drawer. He tilted his head slightly. Under the light from the fire, she could faintly see his elegant side profile. He didn't shift his gaze away from her. He held the cigarette in his mouth, raised his head and blew out the smoke. He tugged the collar of his military uniform, trying to suppress something that was surging out of his body. Bojio felt that this Almighty was very cute. That's right, cute. Even though he was suppressing it, he was still extremely aloof and cold. His aura was still full of malice. It was easy to be mesmerized. She wanted to reach out and touch his hand, to see if it was soft. Bojio gave it a try. But it wasn't his hand she touched, it was his face. She held it with both hands, the corners of her lips slightly curved. He almost blurted out, "Be my boyfriend, will you? I can give you the best things in the world." He allowed her to do as she pleased, his thin lips pursed. "Do you want to die?" Bojio laughed. "No, I want to kiss you." Chin Mo paused, a familiar warmth returning to his lips, but his tone didn't change. "Shut up if you don't want to be thrown out, little gangster." Bojio arched a brow. She remained in that position, tilting her head and planting a kiss on the side of his face. It was just a touch, a goodbye. Chin Mo paused with the cigarette in his mouth. His dark eyes were beautiful enough to move anyone's heart. But he could only see one person. It was already late at night when he really fell asleep. The rumors in the army caused the old commander to be in a mess. What's going on? As he said that, he turned around and said to his adjutant, "Do you believe that cold brat can endure being suppressed by others?" Report, I don't believe it. The adjutant puffed out his chest and raised his head. This rumor is too ridiculous. The old general thought for a while. Do you think he'll keep his only child? There were many good technical soldiers in the army. However, it was very rare to see someone who excelled in jungle combat and had good electronic skills. That was why he was such a treasure. The adjutant felt that his old general had asked him a question that was too difficult to answer. They wouldn't be able to guess Demon Chin's thoughts. At first, he thought he would get an answer the next day. But before the answer came, the army received a mission to carry out a hostage rescue. There wasn't any warmth. Everyone went straight to the gathering point. Chapter 1157. Under such circumstances, everything happened quickly. They could even see the Almighty's back view as he walked out of the room. But when the time came, all of this would disappear. At this moment, Prince finally experienced the speed of this place. Everyone had to bring 3 items. A gun, a watch and a black mask. It was more impactful than in the movies. Because in the real world, every Special Forces soldier rarely showed their faces when they were on the move. When they came, they were like a pack of wolves, their gaze determined but silent. No matter how many questions Prince had, he wouldn't ask the youngster beside him at this moment. At this moment, everyone was focused on their mission. Both the new recruits and the members of the operation team were dressed the same. Her face was covered with a black mask, and she held a rifle in one hand. She glanced sideways to adjust the shooting distance. It was as though she was born to be here. It was just that the army would never use the hostage rescue as a chance for anyone to practice. The operation team was at the front. Bojio and the others were at the back, hiding in a place they were supposed to hide. There weren't many hostages because of the narcotics operation. One of them was chased here, and along the way, he hijacked a school bus. In such a place, even the school bus was donated. The road wasn't easy. The driver's leg was injured, and they were in the middle of negotiating. They had used all the necessary methods. The 3 of them were experienced. They didn't agree to the hostage exchange. They only wanted unopened bottles of water. They even rejected food because they thought there would be drugs inside. It had been 6 hours since the incident had happened. They didn't accept the food provided here, and only ate the small biscuits in the students' backpacks. The students would definitely be hungry. But as compared to hunger, fear was more unbearable. All of them shrunk into their seats, not daring to move after their food was snatched. They looked at the muzzle of the gun, trembling so much that their lips turned white. They were all children. With the long-range gun, every movement in the bus could be seen clearly through the window. There were only 3 of them. It was extremely difficult to deal with them in an instant and not give them a chance to harm others. The 3 of them weren't stupid. Each of them had a child in their hands and tried their best to avoid moving around the window. What was good for the operation was that one of them was seriously injured and needed medicine and medical attention. That man seemed to be their little boss. Bojio shifted the muzzle. When she glanced over, she saw a familiar face. She had seen that face in the video before. He had no specific nationality and was active in the Golden Triangle all year round. He was a member of that organization and was mainly responsible for selling goods. Bojio narrowed her eyes. She lifted the gun and glanced at his mouth. Prince was a qualified soldier, but he was still young. Which country are they from? What are they talking about? Nationality unknown, but... Bojio arched a brow. They need a doctor now. That's their next condition. Prince was stunned. This brat even knew how to read lips. Alright, even if she knew how to read lips, how did she know the gibberish? That's a minor language, right? Prince was still frowning. Chapter 1158. Enter the bus? The negotiator's mouth was dry. He held on to the mineral water bottle, but wasn't in the mood to drink. No, that won't do. There are so many hostages on the bus, and they are all children. The criminal's emotions aren't stable and the psychological aspect is more important. I know special forces like you are very good at solo battles and ambushes, but the way you talk will determine the safety of the hostages. Chinmo's face was still covered by a black scarf, so his face couldn't be seen clearly, but his eyes were as black as shattered stars. The first question: I have studied psychology and have relevant certificates in this field. I know negotiation techniques. The second question: the other party spoke in Burmese, so I can understand them. So can you help me prepare the things now? Chinmo's voice was still calm, but his eyes never left the school bus. The negotiator obviously didn't expect to get such an answer. The expression on his face reflected his thoughts. Almost 7 hours had passed. The person in charge's forehead was covered in sweat. He was afraid that something would go wrong. He couldn't afford to bear the consequences if any of the children were hurt. When he heard Chinmo's words, he turned. How confident are you? 50-50. Chinmo wasn't holding onto a gun, but he was wearing a high-end communication earpiece. Even here, he could use hand signals to adjust the position of the snipers. The person in charge looked at him and found it hard to make a decision. You've seen how cunning these people are. They aren't idiots. Even if you put on a doctor's white coat, you won't be able to gain their trust. Chinmo frowned. From a certain perspective, that was indeed the case. He was the soldier who was the least like a major general in the military. Compared to a soldier, Chinmo's aura was too lazy and indifferent. But it was probably due to the environment he grew up in. When people first saw him, they would feel his aura. From the perspective of this operation, it wasn't an advantage. Right at this moment, Bojio, who had been hiding in the corner, held on to something and leaped down. She landed silently, but her words were clear. I'll go. 2 words. The people who were discussing this matter all stopped. The negotiator could only see Bojio's figure. It was a little thin for a soldier. He couldn't see her face, but he could feel that she didn't look much like a soldier in her uniform. Since when were there special forces like this? Bojio was still holding on to her gun as she walked over. She glanced at Chinmo with her eyes that weren't covered by the black scarf. Compared to Captain, my looks are easier to lower one's guard. A doctor who isn't that tall wouldn't be able to raise their guard. Besides, Captain, you should know that I'm good at disguising myself. Chinmo's tone was calm. You have no business here, go back. Bojio didn't move, her eyes dark. Chinmo's fingers moved. When he looked at that person, there were too many emotions in his eyes. You want me to believe that you can complete the mission? Yes. Bojio straightened. Chapter 1159. This time, the person in charge didn't object. Because there wasn't any more time to say anything. If they delayed any longer, they would miss the opportunity. But Bojio had never seen such a gaze from the Almighty. It was cold with a hint of sparkle. Bojio pulled the black mask over her face, intending to wear the clothes herself. After all, the white coat had been brought over. But before Bojio could reach her hand out, Chinmo had already taken over the job. That person paused, wanting to say something. But for some reason, even though the person in front of him was wearing a mask, the dark camouflage uniform and the eyes that were exposed outside the black mask were so deep that they couldn't help but take a step back. She came from a military background, but when she met such a man, her heart still raced. His aura was too strong. Wasn't he the armed police from the side? Bojio was surprised, but she still stood there. Honestly, she had never been so obedient before. No matter how words were used to describe it, or how beautiful the scene was. But those who were standing there knew that it was extremely fast. He had personally helped her change into the white coat. Even the embedded earphones weren't placed by her ears as per usual. Instead, he had disguised it as a button. It was so precise and fast. The members of the operation team watched from the side, their hearts trembling. They had never seen their boss in such a state before. Even when he was in disguise, he hadn't been this careful. It felt as though he was afraid that something would go wrong, and he wouldn't be able to see the person in front of him again. Actually, every time they went out on a mission, boss would make sure everything was in place. But this was the first time he had done it personally. And there was an indescribable feeling. In such a tense situation, no one would think about it. Even if they took a glance, they wouldn't place their attention on it. Once a disguise was involved, the safety factor for such a mission wasn't high. Moreover, the person in the car had a gun. But everyone knew that recruit number 10 was right. He was the most suitable person to wear the white coat because he didn't look like a soldier at all. In addition, the large frame glasses perched on the bridge of his nose had no distinguishing features at all. It completely covered the sharpness of this person. Boju looked a little timid, as though she was a doctor who rarely interacted with people. "What are you doing?" The people in the car seemed to be impatient. One of them lifted the child with one hand. Even his facial expression was ferocious. With the blood of a desperado, he pointed the gun at the child's head and said fiercely, "Hurry up and let a doctor in. I'll give you another 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, if I don't see the person I'm supposed to see, I'll kill one person every minute." The child had already begun to cry. His voice was extremely loud, and he was so scared that his entire body was trembling. "Shut up." The man was annoyed by the crying, and he was stuck like this. From a certain point of view, he knew very well that it would be very difficult to escape, but sometimes dragging it out for too long might not be good for them. There was another person lying in the car with one hand pressed against his chest. Because of his injuries, his lips were pale. It was obvious that his injuries were serious. There was a tattoo on his face and his expression was dark. "Don't argue with the children. They're crying. Just knock them out. Are their parents here yet?" Hearing this, the man hurried over. "Yes, boss, can we really get out?" He was still afraid. Even if he was a desperado, he didn't want to die. The injured man's breathing was slightly weak. "You don't believe in Kuang's method? As long as we follow his instructions, when has it ever failed? Pull the children towards the car window and knock them out. Let the parents watch." "Okay." The man did as he said. With a forceful swing, the handle of the gun struck the back of a child's head. In an instant, all the children stopped crying. They were so frightened that their eyes were red and their bodies were trembling. Prince, who was holding a sniper rifle, and everyone else who was carrying out this mission gritted their teeth. They had the urge to press the button and shoot the scum's head. But all of them knew that they couldn't fight. If they were to unleash their anger, what would happen to the children in the car? Wolf was the best sniper in the entire team, other than Chin Mo. No one could understand his emotions. He could have killed the child with a single shot from the previous position. But he couldn't fight. Perhaps those who didn't understand soldiers wouldn't know. On the surface, they looked strong and taciturn. But on the inside, they were a soft and adorable mess. Usually, they were like ordinary people who liked to play around. When they saw someone who made a mistake, they would laugh at the side. When they saw the children, they would intentionally suppress their murderous aura. They didn't want to be so serious because they were worried that they would scare the children. Hence, when they saw this scene, their breathing was heavier than usual. Even their breathing was heavier than usual. It was really unbearable. The ones who couldn't control the most were the parents who had arrived at the scene. When the child's mother saw this scene, she fainted immediately. The others were so anxious that they couldn't wait to charge through the defense line. One of them grabbed the person who stopped them, a pleading expression on his face. Ask them what they want. Money? We can give it to them. Give me my child." The news had already spread. No matter how they tried to control it, it would be on the internet. It wasn't because they didn't defend well. It was because of the people in the car. It was to exert pressure, to make them fulfill all their conditions, and even to the extent of leaving the country. Everyone was paying attention to this matter. This was also the reason why the person in charge was sweating profusely. Even if there was chaos, it would still be in China. Allowing them to act so recklessly, even if the matter was resolved, they would still be held accountable. But now he wasn't afraid of being held accountable. He was thinking about how to ensure that all of the children returned safely, even though there were people crying behind him, or perhaps in disbelief. In reality, he wasn't confident. He could only place all his hopes on the special armed police sent by the military. Yes, it said special armed police, but it didn't mention the military unit number. "I'm done." When Bojo glanced up at the person in charge, there was a coldness that was like the clear waters of the snowy mountains. The person in charge held her hand. "Please, you must succeed. The children are more important." There was another layer of meaning to this sentence. This was what all soldiers knew. It meant that if they were discovered, they had to sacrifice themselves to protect the children. Chapter 1160. The rest of them started to prepare. They hid somewhere or found the best vantage point, so that they could have a clearer view of the situation in the school bus. That way, they would be able to react appropriately in the most urgent situation. However, the entire operation team did not expect that the person who moved the fastest was actually the boss. He held his rifle with one hand, looking like a leopard in the forest as he leaped into the hidden area by the side of the road. Wolf was still hiding, unable to shift his gaze. Sometimes blocking a line of sight was more important than sniping. Prince wasn't good at long-range shooting, so he could only wait anxiously. But just as he was panicking, he saw a figure climbing up the tree suavely. There was a murderous aura at the corner of his eyes. When he sat on the tree branch, he used the surrounding environment to hide his body, blending into the tree. Prince's eyes widened. The big devil? Wolf also felt that there was an additional person behind him. It was just a feeling. He didn't turn back. But he knew it was his boss. Not many people had seen Chinmo's long-range sniping skills. Most of the time, he was in charge of giving orders, which soldiers should be in which position and how to complete the mission safely. These people would be brought back the way they were when they came out. He was called the captain because he had to be the first to charge deep into the enemy's territory. However, not all missions could be completed based on who was strong enough. Prince watched as the person raised his rifle and placed it on his shoulder. He was like the most silent existence, his breathing moving with the wind. "Boss, what is he trying to do?" Hunter opened his mouth. Magician tilted his head, his face covered in dirt. "Shoot. Boss hasn't held a rifle in a long time, right?" Yes, everyone knew that ever since that incident, Chinmo hadn't held a rifle in a real mission. No matter how good his shooting was, it was in the military because he didn't want to. After around 3 seconds, Magician smiled. Magician smiled. Does this mean that boss is really coming back? The person who raised his rifle and drew out an 800-meter no-man's land with a piece of hay in his mouth. That was enough to scare off anyone who tried to trespass the land. But how did he manage to overcome his psychological issues? Hunter didn't ask this question. Back then, they went on that mission together. When he found his boss, his eyes were bloodshot. His gun was placed by his side, his whole body was wet and his wrists were hanging by his side. Back to the army. Regardless of whether it was the higher-ups or the doctors, they all said that boss had been hypnotized and was no longer suitable for any missions. His military rank would be revoked, and he would be sent back to the city. He was the pride of the heavens. They all knew. But who knew? In order to guard this place, his body was full of injuries. During the earthquake, in order to pull a person up, his back was smashed by a heavy object. He had to endure it until he reached the army to get treatment. He was as tough as a mountain. But when the mountain was destroyed, it was like the clear moon in the night sky. Even his departure was silent. Now he raised the gun in his hand, and the muzzle followed a single point. That point landed behind the disguised recruit number 10, not leaving him by even an inch. The surrounding people all fell into silence. That was probably the only protection he could provide. He picked up the gun and locked onto one point. There was no mistake. Chapter 1161. Boss, they're here. One of the people in the school bus tilted to the side and looked out of the bus door. The person who was lying on the bus couldn't turn around and looked at the roof. Go check if they're imposters. Impersonation? That person was obviously confused by the environment and couldn't wrap his head around it. Actually, everyone was feeling pressured at this moment. Both the people who were surrounded and the people who were stationed there. Police imposters. The injured person narrowed his eyes. If they are, kill them and use a child as a warning. All right. The person was about to walk out. Wait a minute. Check if there are any special forces soldiers around when we go out. Boss, I've seen this before. There aren't any special forces soldiers. There are many armed policemen. It seems like they don't want us to leave. It's better if there aren't any. Pay attention to your surroundings and retreat if you see any signs of trouble. Yes. Everyone was worried that a sniper would appear at this moment. But at such a distance, anyone who wasn't a sharpshooter wouldn't be able to do anything to them. When they had chosen their parking spot, they had already taken this into consideration. Most importantly, the doctor didn't look like a police officer in disguise. The criminal with the gun lowered his head, and his fierce eyes met the man in the white coat. "Where's the medicine?" His voice was harsh. The man in the white coat trembled and stuttered. It's here." With that, Bojiu lifted the toolbox in her hands. The criminal was holding onto a child in his left hand, just in case something unexpected happened. He used the barrel of the gun to move the items in the toolbox. Other than a syringe, there was gauze and some medicine. "Boss, he doesn't have a gun, he seems real." The other person was in charge of reporting the situation. "Check if he has earphones." The person's breathing was painful. When his voice came out, it was extremely faint. Of course, Bojiu heard him, but she pretended as though she hadn't heard anything. She continued to stand there, her fingers trembling. The moment the criminal raised his gun, everyone held their breath. The moment he raised his gun, everyone held their breaths. The position where he raised his gun was aimed at Bojiu's head. Prince gritted his teeth so hard that they hurt. The members of the operation team tightened their grip on their guns. Many of them assumed that their boss wouldn't be able to control himself and shoot since no one knew what the criminal was up to. But at this moment, the young man in the white coat took a heavy step back. Then, as if he was scared silly, he squatted on the ground and hugged his head with both hands. "Wait." Number 10's hand signal. Others might not be able to see it, but the snipers could see it. Although he was holding his head, it was indeed a gesture. But why couldn't they understand the gesture? Was this a military gesture? What was the meaning of this? His index finger bent forward a little. Anyone who does missions knows that when you're on a mission, you don't do anything meaningless. Therefore, the young man's actions were definitely meaningful, but they really couldn't understand what it was. A unique hand signal from the army? He couldn't tell how many missions magician and hunter had completed. But there was one person who knew. Unknowingly, this was Prince's thought as he stood under the tree. He had a feeling that the devil hiding on the tree branch would know what that gesture meant. He didn't know why, but he just had this feeling. In fact, Chinemo did know. Chapter 1162. Which meant she had asked him not to shoot first. Chinemo knew everything, but he didn't loosen his grip. Even through the sniper rifle, his eyes were as deep as the galaxy in the night sky. The criminal was relieved. The more afraid the doctor was, the lower the possibility of it being fake. Moreover, the person had knelt down just now. It was obvious that he was scared silly. "Get up." The criminal reached out and pulled Bojiu into the school bus. It was the most dangerous place in the bus. This meant that there would be 3 guns pointed at Bojiu's head. That's right, 3 guns. But the moment she entered, Bojiu understood who was the most difficult person to deal with in the bus. Even though he was injured, he still had a gun in his hand. Even at this moment, he was still sizing her up with the tattooed man. In the video, he was the one who had shot the tourists. Bojiu lowered her lids. She suppressed all her emotions but didn't stop trembling. The tattooed man tilted his head. "Yes, the doctor is here. It isn't fake. I will continue watching. I know I won't be captured alive." For such overseas criminals, being captured alive was the most dangerous thing. Being captured alive meant that they would be able to obtain information. Bojiu stood there motionlessly. Her black-rimmed glasses made her look extremely weak. The criminal behind her pushed her forward forcefully. "Quick. I'll give you 5 minutes. If you can't treat our boss, I'll shoot you. I need a medical kit." Bojiu glanced to the left when she said this. This scene made him look like he was scared to death. But in reality, she was looking at her surroundings. She was looking at every location and the criminal's position as well as their overall abilities. 1v3. One of them was lying on the ground, but he needed the most attention. Bojiu retracted her gaze. She knelt down with trembling hands and took something out of the medical kit. There was a gun pointed at her head. It was obvious that the criminal had relaxed a lot by now, but he was still very nervous. It was fine as long as he was nervous. Humans would always have flaws when they were nervous. Boju lowered her lids. She took out the hemostatic forceps. Her lips were hidden in a place that others couldn't see. I've lost a lot of blood. This was nonsense. Which injured person did not lose a lot of blood? Everything was for the sake of a better disguise, so even the words he said were in line with his identity. The tattooed man moved and gave a look to the other side, indicating for the other side to prepare more things. The criminals also received the signal, but they didn't leave. The three of them were watching the doctor. They couldn't allow anything to go wrong. If Bojo did anything that didn't match her status, she would be shot in the head. At this time, all the children were really scared silly. Looking at this scene, their little hands grabbed the safety belts, for fear that there would be another scene of a gunshot. Bojo wore medical gloves and took out the last tool from the medical box, an injection needle. The tattooed man frowned. Check. Yes. Both of them were drug dealers. The criminal took the injection needle and didn't find any problems. More importantly, Bojo stuttered. This medicine has stabilizing properties. When treating serious injuries, there would always be anesthetics and stabilizers. This sentence caused the tattooed man's eyes to flicker. Chapter 1163. It was at that moment. Prince, who was standing under the tree, suddenly realized that there was a completely different aura coming from the tree. Like a ferocious tiger coming out of its cage, the man suddenly adjusted the muzzle of his gun, turning it 45 degrees. He was quick and ruthless. Just when Prince didn't know what was going on, a voice rang out. The person in the school bus suddenly raised the syringe in his hand. Just as everyone was looking at the young man with worry in their hearts, his movements were so fast that it was almost a blur to the eyes. The tattooed man, who was lying on the ground, was shocked. He didn't even have time to move. The hand that was holding the gun had its tendons severed. Everything happened too quickly. It was so fast that the two men next to him had just raised their guns. A loud bang was heard. No one knew where the gunshot had come from, but that was the sound. It was the thug who had pointed the gun at Bojo's head. The blood was like a blood mist, spreading in the air. The tattooed man screamed out loud. Another gangster standing next to him had already reached out to grab a child. Sniping, no angle. But at this moment, the young man moved his long legs, and using the momentum, he leaped forward and kicked the criminal's wrist. Then, the force from the rotation of her body turned the young man's white coat into a weapon in her hand. There was a swishing sound. The white coat fell and covered the criminal's head. The moment he felt the pain and darkness, a second gunshot rang out, breaking through the car window. First, the glass shattered, followed by a headshot. Who was it? Who was that sniper? The same question appeared in everyone's mind. The tattooed man looked at the doctor who had stopped. He was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat, but his eyes narrowed a little fiercely. Who are you? This was not a doctor at all. He actually didn't see it. Large beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. The tattooed man's heart sank as he looked at the harmless-looking youth. He had never seen this face before, so how could he be so strong? Bojo's face was still stained with blood. Because she had been too fast, she had cut her fingers. However, none of this could affect her temperament. It was a kind of evil that lived in the darkness all year round. After she squatted down, she looked at the tattooed man and smiled. You're asking me who I am? I'm your old enemy. You can call me Daddy. The tattooed man had no way to describe his feelings at this moment. Daddy. He wanted to hit someone, but he could only curl up in pain. Outside the car came the sound of people passing by. She reached out and hugged him, patting his back. She really didn't know how to comfort a child, so she used the same method the Almighty had used to comfort her when she was young. Don't be afraid, big sister will buy you some sweets later, everything is fine now. Your mother is outside, I'll open the car door now. You guys can alight one by one, don't squeeze, you will hurt yourselves. The boy, who had been scared out of his wits, moved a little after hearing that, as if he had come back to his senses. Sometimes a hug is enough to comfort someone. The little kids knew that the danger was over. One of the bolder ones lifted his head, his fingers tugging the hem of her shirt. He asked shyly, Isn't it supposed to be a PLA uncle? Why big sister? Chapter 1164. The people outside were anxious. The tattooed man lying in the car could no longer move. The parents were the first to break through the defense line. Some of them even pushed the guards who were originally standing at the side. But at a time like this, everyone could understand how they wanted to receive it. Compared to the chaos outside. When the children got off the bus, they followed the order of their seats. Bojo arranged for them to form a line. She stood in front of the tattooed man and crippled his other hand. This way she would be more at ease. The children were also covered in blood. Their faces were still filled with fear from what had just happened. One of the children's legs turned to jelly when he took a single step. Bojo reached out to prevent her from falling. She said carefully, "Walk slowly, there's no rush." The little bean nodded. He was still afraid. However, all of them were very obedient. He sniffled and continued to walk forward. When he walked out of the school bus, his mother hugged him in her arms and he burst into tears. The situation was finally under control. The person in charge heaved a sigh of relief. However, there was another person who heaved a sigh of relief. It was the crown prince. When the devil sat on the tree, his aura was too strong and he only fired 2 shots. 2 shots, no more and no less. Every time the gun was pulled, it brushed past his ear. Prince was the one who saw everything clearly. When that person jumped down from the tree, there was only one thought in his mind. He was a sharpshooter. How could a headshot be made from such a tricky position? No, it was 2. It was mainly because he was fast. Not only was he fast, but it seemed like he had already analyzed the opponent's movements when he raised his gun. His mentality, speed, and combat experience were all factors. The Crown Prince's thoughts were a little chaotic, but this did not affect him from rushing out to enjoy the joy. He was really happy. As long as he saw the group of little beans jumping around with their friends, he would always feel relieved in his heart. Everyone in the operation team put away their guns, as if they had never appeared. Prince and Wolf were in the same area as Chin-mo. The demon's pocket was bulging as he walked towards the school bus with a spear in one hand. After the smoke subsided, there was a vast expanse of white on the battlefield. The man's back was straight, and he wore a combat uniform with a black band around his wrist. When he passed through the crowd, time seemed to stop. People are looking back. Chin-mo didn't seem to care. He pulled the youngster out of the car. Then they gave each other a tight hug. Even that pair of eyes of the night had become so deep that it was completely dark. Bojo paused, sniffing the pleasant peppermint scent. It was different from usual, carrying the smell of gunpowder. She wanted to reach out too, but then she realized that there was blood on her hands and clothes. "Brother Emo, I'm dirty." "I don't mind." Chin-mo tightened his grip, as though he wanted to knead her into his bones. "You don't mind?" He returned the hug. Bojo smiled and reached out. This kind of hug was not excessive at this time. After all, the scene just now could be described as a matter of life and death. It was just that the few people who were familiar with their boss were in a state of shock. They couldn't believe that the great demon would do something like that. Previously, when they were carrying out missions, the boss would also revive them when they survived a disaster. But hugs. Chapter 1165. If it hadn't been for his superb marksmanship, they would have suspected that he was a fake boss. The little kids stood at the side, their eyes wide as they watched the scene. His parents wiped their tears. "Hurry, thank the 2 uncles from the People's Liberation Army." The little kids remained silent. One of them tugged his mother's sleeves, leaning towards her ear. "One of them is an elder sister. You can't differentiate between genders. Don't call anyone good-looking your elder sister." With a smile he ended the topic. But the unforgettable topic was the hug in front of them. Of course, that was an internal matter of the operation team. The person in charge walked over, getting his men to detain the tattooed man. He couldn't walk anymore, but he was still breathing. This proved that the mission had been a success. They had captured him alive. The tattooed man was carried down. When he saw the people wearing black scarves, his first reaction was that they weren't ordinary policemen. They were definitely from the military. but he couldn't tell which military unit they were from since they were all wearing black scarves. Among the onlookers, there was a journalist who wanted to record this scene. But Qin Mo was the first to notice. He glanced at Magician on the left. Magician took a step forward, blocking the camera. "I'm sorry, I can't take photos. Please hand over the film." "Why? Mister, your heroic deeds should be reported and let everyone know. This is such a great contribution. Without you, these children would not have been saved." The reporter adjusted the angle, trying to capture the image of Qin Mo and Bojio. Was that the disguised doctor who entered the school bus? Magician frowned. This time he didn't hesitate, reaching for the camera. He opened it swiftly and took out the memory card, breaking it into two. "Hey, what's wrong with you? Don't think you're so great just because you're an armed policeman. Why did you touch my camera?" Magician ignored him, returning to Qin Mo's side. "Boss, it's settled. Retreat," Qin Mo said. The person in charge basically understood the situation. The worker was still shouting, "Unreasonable. I want more people to know how heroic they are. I admire them. Why are these people so arrogant? It's fine if they don't understand, but they even broke my things." In fact, as long as the worker wasn't so selfish, he should understand that not allowing him to film was good for himself. They forced their admiration onto others, but they didn't know that their own actions could very well expose such a mysterious operation team, which would be even more dangerous. A world-class mercenary organization was not weak. Not only would they be able to obtain information from your appearance, but they would also be able to target you based on your clothing, body shape, and combat habits. The person in charge gestured to the guard. The meaning of the gesture was very simple. It was to take that person away. The more he explained, the more information he would reveal. He might as well not say anything. Even he initially thought that the people sent to them this time were armed policemen. But when the person in charge saw one of them pretending to be a doctor and his every move, as well as the two perfect sniping sounds just now that were impossible for an ordinary person to achieve, the person in charge was shocked. He knew that they were not armed police. Special forces appeared in his mind, but he wasn't sure which unit they were from or what their numbers were. These people stood tall and silent. Even their guns were full of strength. When they were silent, one wouldn't even be able to sense their presence. Such special forces. The person in charge's expression changed, but he didn't say anything. The tattooed man wasn't willing to admit defeat. When his eyes swept past Qin Mo, it seemed as though they were filled with venom. "You are dead." He spoke in Burmese, as though he was spitting venomous words. Qin Mo didn't even look at him. Blood trickled down the tattooed man's lips. His wrist hung limply, his gaze landing on Bojio's face. "Especially you, doctor." At this moment, Qin Mo moved. He blocked the man, his thin lips moving slightly. "You won't have the chance because you will die in China's prison." The tattooed man's eyes widened in disbelief when he heard that voice. That voice, that demonic presence. The tattooed man would never forget the time when someone had sniped the 10 of them like a ghost. Until the very end, they hadn't been able to locate him. If it hadn't been for reinforcements, he would have lost his life. The memory was too deep. Hence he couldn't forget that voice. It was the person who had destroyed them when they were at their peak, when they had the most believers. How was that possible? Hadn't he been hypnotized? Why was he here? The tattooed man's expression changed. Even after he was sent into the police car, his heart still pounding. It was a fear that was imprinted in the depths of his heart. With the closing of the police car door, everything stopped. The little kids were still standing there, a little afraid but also a little eager to speak. Mommy. MH. The older brother is holding on to the older sister, as though she's a little kid. Those are the two older brothers. Don't mistake them for someone else. But indeed, they seemed to be holding on to a little kid. Perhaps it was because one of them was too tall and had a black mask over his face. The other was handsome but young. Bojio glanced down at her hand, the wound that the Almighty had treated. Even though the wound wasn't important to her, the Almighty held on to her wrist. But with the Almighty holding her wrist, she could always feel the warmth under the thin skin. It felt like jade. It was obvious that he had other matters to attend to. It wasn't appropriate for him to hold on to her like that. Hence, the people beside their boss watched as he took something out from his pocket and placed it in the youngster's hand. "Come over after you're done eating." Bojo glanced down at the thing in her palm, her lips lifting into a smile. Magician, who was closest to them, had been walking normally when he bumped into a tree. Hunter had fared better, at least he hadn't knocked into the tree. But when they saw the scene, their reactions were the same. It was a little surreal. Prince opened his mouth, wanting to say something. However, when he met the devil's gaze, he quickly looked up at the sky and whistled, acting as though he hadn't seen anything. His heart was filled with gossip. F***ck. What exactly was going on? Wolf remained silent. Silent. But the little kids weren't silent. They turned and asked, "Mommy, did you bring sweets? You're still thinking about sweets at a time like this?" The mother glanced at her son's blood-stained arm, hugging him. The little kid pouted. "That big brother brought sweets for little brother. I saw it, it's orange-flavored. It's good to have a big brother, Mommy. Can you and Daddy give me another big brother? Bring me sweets when he grows up." Hearing that, the mother was stunned. She looked behind her and saw the young man who had been pretending to be a doctor. He had a lollipop in his mouth and one hand was in his pocket. His expression was a little lazy, and the hem of his shirt was being pulled by another child. "Big sister, I know Mommy said your little brother. Didn't you say you were going to give me sweets? Come with me." The youngster raised a finger, shaking it. "I can't give you this." "Why?" The little kid was starting to get agitated. The youngster wasn't moved. "My captain gave it to me. The meaning is different depending on the person who gave it to me. Understand?" The little kid obviously didn't understand. Wasn't it just a candy? On the other hand, Prince was conflicted. So the devil's pocket was bulging because of the sweets? The devil's sweets. Who would link these two things together? Moreover, the devil coaxed his soldiers by giving them sweets? Wasn't that a little too feminine? Prince imagined that if the devil gave him a piece of sweets, it would be scarier than the end of the world. Prince shuddered and stretched out his hand to rub his arm. The truth proved that Prince was thinking too much. Magician and Hunter stood at the side, their thoughts turning 180 degrees. "There's a problem." Of course. Hugging was fine, but giving sweets? When did their boss go down this path? "Why do I feel like I'm being tortured?" "What do you mean?" "I've never felt as single as I do today." These words were said in a whisper. That was because their boss had completed the final communication with the person in charge here. It was simple, A-level confidentiality. Don't spread it, don't mention it, don't upload any images and don't do any case analysis for the time being. Qin Mo's voice was light, and when it came through the black scarf, it carried a kind of nobility. The person in charge wasn't muddle-headed, he understood. He paused before continuing, "Comrade, don't worry, we will take care of the aftermath." Usually, when they couldn't control themselves and had to give a detailed explanation of the case, they would look for the local armed police and let them say that they were the ones who completed the mission. In China, some people couldn't even leave their names behind after doing something. That was because they had to deal with more ruthless terrorist organizations. Magician and Hunter listened to their boss's communication, feeling that he had entered the wrong profession for such a strong aura. Especially when their boss was wearing a black mask and his gaze swept over them. He seemed like the boss of Chinatown. His aura was like a mountain torrent. "Honestly, boss, you shouldn't have joined the army. You should have become a gangster." The mission was over. Their communication was completed. Qin Mo reached out, switching his phone out of flight mode. In an instant he received a message. "Boss, this is the information you asked us to intercept. It's regarding number 10. Every recruit would have their information intercepted. This was a form of defense for the special forces. Once you were here, you had to be completely transparent." Chapter 1166. Regardless of whether it was the messages she sent or her usual previews, they all appeared on Qin Mo's phone. Every single message was related to the Asian Cup. There was even a request from a certain someone. "Please obtain the qualification for the Asian Cup." That youngster probably didn't ask anyone for such a favor. Hence, even her tone seemed a little stiff. The last message was sent to Feng Yi. Qin Mo knew that it was for him. The Almighty will go back. Qin Mo's gaze swept past the 5 words and landed on obediently Darling, who was standing not far away with a lollipop in her mouth. Her hand was wrapped in white gauze, and her head was lowered as she spoke to a little bean. Qin Mo didn't know what they were talking about, and under her black hair was a glowing side profile. It wasn't appropriate. The location and time weren't appropriate. The clothes he was wearing weren't appropriate either. Qin Mo tightened his grip, as though he was suppressing something. Then he walked over. Bojio seemed to have sensed his approach, glancing up. The little bean wanted to say, "Big brother, your little brother is so petty." Unexpectedly, he was the one to take the initiative. "Captain, this little bean wants to snatch my lollipop." Little bean. Little brother isn't just petty, he's also shameless. Didn't he say he would give in to the little kid? Fortunately, someone was teaching him a lesson. The little bean glanced at the tall big brother. He reached over and grabbed the back of his collar as though he was a sack. His voice was calm. "Let's go." He had to go home and teach the little brother a lesson. Whenever he was disobedient, his father would often do the same. But the little brother wasn't bad. He was just a little shameless, but he had saved them just now. "Mommy, will that big brother bully the little brother?" Magician and Hunter were walking at the back. They could vaguely hear the child's voice in the air. They thought to themselves, "Kid, don't you know our boss is different from normal people? How could he be lecturing you? He's more like spoiling you." If he really wanted to teach him a lesson, he would only ask one question. "Do you think you are suitable to be a foreign special forces soldier? If you think you are, come and fight with me." Just this question alone made many recruits retreat in the face of difficulties. But now it was different. Indeed, it was different. Even though Qin Mo had a sense of propriety and restraint, he couldn't resist the strong gossiping heart of the operation team. "Huntsman, it's number 10. You're the one who picked him up. Don't you have any information on him?" Magician tried to find out more. The hunter was furious. "If there was, why couldn't I find out about it?" "Strange, who is it?" Magician turned his head and looked at the back view of the person in the white coat. He thought about what this recruit had been doing all this while and suddenly froze. F***CK, it can't be it's that guy? Hunter frowned. "Who is it?" "In Jiang City, when we went to look for Boss, he recognized a younger brother." Magician felt it was hard to explain. The hunter was shocked. "Younger brother? Boss." He didn't seem like the kind of person who would recognize a younger brother. Because of that person, we suspected that Boss was gay. Magician tilted his head. "Now it seems like he really is gay. Why didn't I think of it just now? The last time we were on a mission, this person pretended to be a member of the film crew and walked right in front of me. I didn't even notice anything strange about him. In the end, Boss caught him." Hunter couldn't hear the rest of the conversation. All his thoughts were occupied by one word. Chapter 1167. Magician didn't deny it. Instead he asked, "Can you explain why our boss gave her candy just now?" He really couldn't explain it. The recruits didn't know and thought that the devil would occasionally be as gentle as a gentle breeze. But they knew that he wouldn't be like that to others. Hunter took a step forward. Magician asked, "What's wrong?" "I suffered a huge blow. I need a break. This is too much of a shock. I wasn't prepared at all." Hunter felt like he was done for. Honestly, the fact that their captain liked the blue child was ridiculous. Magician patted his shoulder. "I can understand your feelings. We felt the same way back then." "So, that fellow chased after the troops?" Hunter's imagination wasn't bad. Magician glanced up. "You were a witness yesterday. He had witnessed his boss being pressed down. His boss was pressed down." The more Hunter thought about it, the more his world seemed to be collapsing. At this moment, a group of people had reached an uninhabited area. They split up from the rest and headed to the place where the military aircraft could land. Qin Mo glanced over, catching sight of the youngster with a lollipop in her mouth. Her face was black and stained with blood. "Little Bojio. MH. Bojo was surprised that the Almighty would call her name in such a situation. Chinemo asked leisurely, "Are you done with the candy?" There's only a stick left." She sucked on it. But even she hadn't expected the Almighty to ask, "Do you want a kiss?" Bojo's collar was still being tugged at. She felt the Almighty's hand lift the white coat up, and her eyes met the handsome face that was very close to her. The black mask had long been pulled up to his chin, and the dark color made his face look flawless and noble. A few strands of his black hair fell down, blocking his beautiful eyes and brows. Half of his body seemed to be wrapped around her, blocking not only the wind in the forest, but also the hunter's line of sight. The sudden intimacy. As his thin lips landed, the scent of tobacco lingered around her. Bojo felt her breath being sucked away. Her heart seemed to be scratched by a furry claw, a layer of sweetness gushing out. It was a light kiss, like a candy hidden in the Almighty's pocket. Both of their lips had the taste of oranges. Traces of numbness came from between their lips and slid over their skin. For a moment, the only thing left in her nose was the unique taste of a man. It was the smell of gunpowder with a hint of mint and tobacco, making it hard for her to let go. Magician and Hunter, who were standing not far away from them, froze. "Boss, are you bullying us because we haven't been in a relationship before? Is that why you're acting so nonchalant? Even if you pull up your clothes like that, we still know how to kiss, okay?" Could it be? Magician and Hunter looked at each other. Based on their understanding of their boss, this meant that he didn't care whether they knew or not. On the other side, Bojo's breathing was erratic. The corners of her mouth curled up faintly. Her head was still half covered by the white coat, and her little face was flushed. Unfortunately, the color of her face could not be seen at all. Chapter 1168. There was a hint of a smile in the Almighty's voice when he said that. It was a classic honey trap. Bojo couldn't guard against it, and didn't want to either. Hence, she stood there and allowed the Almighty to wipe his face. As for the destructive gazes from the side, Bojo wasn't bothered. Anyway, it was a good chance for others to know that the Almighty was hers. When Hunter and Magician returned to the military unit, they felt as though they were floating. In the past, they had been gossiping about their relationship as a joke. Now that they were in a relationship, how could they gossip? It was against the rules in the military unit. Boss, why exactly did he do that? Not to mention the ambiguous kiss just now. The candy incident had spread throughout the entire army in less than a morning. Everyone was trying to guess their relationship, and naturally, the old general heard about it. "What did you say? That youngster gave candy? Was he lying to me? Or was he joking?" The old general took a sip of tea. The adjutant stepped forward. Reporting, "It's completely true, sir." The old general wanted to say something else. The person in question was already standing at the door. He was dressed in his military uniform, standing against the light. His aura made the adjutant, who had been in this position for many years, feel a little fearful. No, he couldn't be fearful. After all, he was still his junior. The old general's reaction would be swift. His gossipy face had turned into a bright smile, like a wise man with many layers of knowledge. "You're here?" The mission was a success. Chinemo walked in and gave a standard salute, his tone lazy. "I'm sure you've heard." The old general took a sip of tea. "Heard? What did you hear?" "It has nothing to do with me." Chinemo didn't beat around the bush, going straight to the point. The old general pretended to be confused, turning towards his adjutant. "This youngster is speaking in riddles again. What does he want?" Reporting, "I'm not sure." The adjutant was an honest man, his face turning red the moment he lied. "Since the chief is so concerned about recruit number 10, you should be aware of his recent movements. For example, the rumors about him suppressing me should have reached you a long time ago. Adjutant Lee is a messenger, so it's not hard for him to find out such information. Since the chief insists that he hasn't heard of it, as the person involved, I can explain it to him. I have a special relationship with recruit number 10, so it's not suitable for us to go on a mission together. She won't be part of the operation team for this overseas mission." Liemo nodded. The old general's expression turned serious for the first time. He reached out and pinched his glabella. Chin Mo, you aren't an emotional person. Chin Mo's expression turned serious. Chin Mo, you aren't an emotional person. When someone points a gun at her head, I can't stay calm. If I don't stay calm, I won't be able to complete the mission. The old general looked at him and said, but today you did very well. It's different outside the country. Even at this moment, Chin Mo's thoughts were clear. We won't have any reinforcements there, we won't be able to disguise ourselves, and we won't even have a path of retreat. The old general had his own insistence. Number 10 is a rare technical soldier. I admit it. When Chin Mo said these 3 words, he could even imagine a certain someone sitting in front of the computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Even the coldness in his eyes melted. He smiled faintly. There aren't many people who are better than him in terms of network technology. The adjutant standing at the side. What's with the feeling of being sold? But, with that, Chin Mo paused and glanced at the old general, his tone calm. If it was your daughter, would you let her go to the battlefield? The old general had a daughter, and he had wanted her to get to know this cold boy. He was a soldier, and indeed, he had never thought of letting his daughter go to the front line. What kind of place was that? It was a place where people could eat people. Chin Mo smiled, and there was an indescribable emotion in his words. You wouldn't. The old general choked, and for a moment he couldn't say a word. In the end he said weakly, Cold boy, you are being unreasonable. That isn't your daughter. That isn't my daughter. Chin Mo stood up, stuffing one hand into his pocket. He looked lazy, but in fact, there was a glint in the corner of his eyes. He spoke in a casual tone, but the words that came out of his mouth shocked the other 2. That's my life. Just 5 short words. The old general couldn't say another word. Chin Mo stood with his back to the light, and his voice came again. For the mission the day after tomorrow, think of a way to make her stay. This kind of conversation would not be heard by a 4th person other than the 3 of them. After Chin Mo left, the air in the room seemed to have quietened down. After an unknown period of time, the sound of the clock shaking could be heard. The old general knocked on the stainless steel in his hand. Was that fellow asking me for a favor? I think so. Even though it was unbelievable, the adjutant was still suppressed by the words, that is my life, until now. Who could ask the devil to ask someone for a favor? It was hard to imagine that such words would come out of the devil's mouth. However, it was precisely because of this. He and the old general would understand the significance of number 10 to him. Send the name list. The old general put down his cup, his gaze a little heavy. The day after tomorrow seemed to have been decided. Even he was just cooperating with the work on this mission. No one could predict how dangerous it would be. Most of the people who came had a rough idea. The stricter the selection, the more unpredictable it was. In fact, after today's incident, there were already 2 people with psychological problems. They were indeed the best of the best in the military, and they were also very brave. However, the quality of their sleep would directly reflect the situation. The doctor had already marked a cross on the psychological aspect. This mission didn't only require physical conditions, but also psychological endurance. After all, the other party had a psychological hypnotist. That would be the real nightmare. The military didn't slack off in their training. Even if they completed a rescue mission, they still had to do what they had to do. The further they went, the more intense the selection became. Basically, everyone was covered in mud. Perhaps it was because of the rumors or the exhaustion from the training, but one of the new recruits suddenly stood up during the break. He looked towards Bojio. Do you dare to compete? During the mission, the new recruit was at the periphery and wasn't sure what was going on. Chapter 1169. Bojio wiped the sweat off her chin when she was called. She glanced up, her gaze deep. Prince was in the same dormitory as Bojio and they were in the same team. Moreover, they had been together for such a long time. He knew Bojio's performance better than anyone else. Now, someone said that she had relied on her connections to get her position. That was so frustrating. Prince wanted to stand up for her. After all, He came from the military and had a fiery temper. He hadn't expected someone to interrupt him. What do you want to compete in? It was Bojio. She stood up with one hand stuffed into her pocket, and the other hand behind her back, wiping the last drop of sweat off her chin. Her tone was calm. No one in the military would be too harsh. Someone had suggested this challenge, because he was responsible for the mission. He knew how hard it was to become a technical soldier, but he had to be someone worthy of their protection. You pick. That was the recruit's reply. Bojio glanced up. I'm fine with anything. Then let's not compete in a single match. After today's training, we'll meet in the jungle. According to the international jungle rules, regardless of the method, the one who explodes first wins. It was rare for a recruit to have such a challenge. That recruit also knew that according to the previous rumors, it was their technical soldiers who had destroyed the opposing team. But the others didn't know that there was a sniper among them. If there hadn't been an outstanding sniper, Number 10 wouldn't have been able to infiltrate the enemy camp. They were the last to be sacrificed. From the start to the end, they hadn't seen Number 10. The reason why they chose the jungle challenge was to tell the recruit that if the technical soldier was too weak during an overseas mission, he would be a burden to the entire operation team. Bojio understood what he meant. She drank a mouthful of water and replied, "Okay." Prince opened his mouth. He wanted to tell Bojio that this was the recruit with the highest qualities in Team 2. His sniping and concealment skills were top-notch. She should consider before agreeing. But on second thought, if he was in her shoes, he would have accepted the challenge too. But brother, tell me the truth. What exactly is your relationship with the devil? Was it really as the rumors said? The military didn't allow such special feelings. Two men. Even if they weren't in the military, it wasn't possible. If this was true, even the great devil would have to be demoted in rank. Even though she hadn't been in the military, she knew the logic behind it. She smiled. What do you think our relationship is? This question made Prince choke. What should he say? F***ck. Just as Prince's face turned green, Bojio opened her mouth again, her tone leisurely. Family. Family members. Prince's eyes widened. What do you mean? Holy sh**t, he was even stuttering. It was mainly because this word was too misleading. Bojio arched a brow and pointed at herself. I'm handsome, right? Captain is handsome too. It's easy to tell. Prince. Are you praising yourself or answering my question? Don't tell me you're brothers. Prince chuckled. Bojio turned nonchalant. Congratulations, you got it right. But we aren't blood-related, we're cousins. Cousins? Prince felt that something was amiss. Then why did you suppress the devil that day? Bojio arched a brow. I just wanted to ask my brother to not tell anyone about our relationship, so that the people here wouldn't have any ill feelings towards me. We are all new soldiers and I don't know how to fold my blanket. It's embarrassing. Don't you want people to know that your uncle is our old general? Bojio raised her eyebrows. Prince found the first half reasonable, but when he heard the last sentence, his expression darkened. He pointed at Bojio. Yee. F***ck, how did she know? That didn't make sense. Bojio took another sip of water, a devilish smile on her face. So you believe me now? Me? Tell me how you know my identity first. Prince thought to himself. Wasn't his disguise good enough? He hadn't even interacted with his uncle before. Bojio replied slowly. I'll find out if I want to. Youngster, you're still too naive. It's something that can be settled with a computer. How can it be so troublesome? Prince was stunned. He held on to Lin Fan's hand. Brother, please don't tell anyone about this. I really want to join the army. Sure. Bojio placed the water down. Tell me your conditions. Prince glared. Another F***king condition? Why did he join the military instead of being a robber? Tell me, what are your conditions? Prince was behaving like a little wife. Bojio pointed at her phone. I was warned by my captain that if I use my phone again, he'll kick me out of the military. Think of a way to get me a phone. We can't contact anyone in the military. Prince had his principles. Oh, Bojio replied. Then I'll go talk to my roommates about your family background. F***ck. Prince reached out and pulled her back. Promise me that you won't include any pictures in your messages, and the topic can't be related to the military. Also, you can't describe the situation here. Boju looked at him. Do you think I'm committing treason? Of course I wouldn't do such a thing. I'm just sending a message to my teammates. Teammates? Prince was dumbfounded. Do you miss your army unit? Boju glanced up at the sky. She felt that she had to hide her identity since there was a video online of her admitting to being a girl. Even though the military wouldn't be able to see it since it was a sealed-off place, it was better to keep a low profile. I miss it. Boju's words were true. Sometimes, whenever she saw the computer and touched the keyboard, she would be reminded of that period of time. She would sit in the club with those people and beat them up. Sometimes, she would flash into the blood pool to kill them. After killing them, they would leave with a chicken wing in their mouths and oil on their hands. At that time, Yao Yao would be sitting beside her, watching Coco and Feng Shang fight for the MVP. Boju's gaze softened when she thought about it. Those eyes used to be dark and cold, but now they seemed to be reflecting something in them. Prince looked at the youngster, and was reminded of his time in the military. At that time, he had been a cold and aloof military prince who was invincible in close combat. Why did he seem to have changed after coming to this military unit? This military unit was poisonous. Alright, I'll get one. Don't tell anyone about this. Prince left with his conditions. He was still thinking about how formidable his cousin was. The devil was already inhuman and now, there was another cunning one. He wouldn't be afraid of any tricks when he carried out missions in the future. In terms of tricks, they weren't weak either. After Prince got his phone, they found a place that wouldn't be easily discovered. It was a strange place. In the forest near the training ground. Hurry up. That was Prince's original words. Boju glanced at him. Don't use such misleading words. If someone passes by, they might think that I did something to you. Prince moved 3 meters away from the youngster. How could he forget about her reputation? Indeed, he had to maintain a distance. It wouldn't be good if others thought that he was gay. His uncle would definitely break his legs. Boju tried to switch on the phone. It wasn't her own phone, and she wasn't used to it. But it was still possible to investigate something or make a phone call to someone. F***ck, why did you download Lil P's livestream? What exactly are you doing? Boju avoided his hand. Why are you so nervous? I'm just entertaining myself. Hurry up and take a walk. After the call, I still have to fight in the forest. I have to stand at a place where I can hear you. Prince was adamant about this. He wouldn't allow anything to go wrong with the phone he brought over. Boju opened the livestream and entered a room. There were already many people inside. Fortunately, it hadn't started yet, which meant that she was on time. She wanted a phone because Yao Yao's competition was today, a solo livestream. That's right, a solo livestream. A solo match that would determine whether Supreme Alliance could qualify for the Asian Cup. Before this, Shui Yao Yao didn't even think that she would be in a competition like this. Shui Yao Yao was a newbie. Her opponent was 1-2. Even though they had the same starting point, their platform was different. YS was a famous team in Asia. Even their newbie was the center of attention. The number of fans on their official Weibo had already exceeded 6 digits. In comparison, the number of viewers on Shui Yao Yao's side was almost negligible. Such a solo match wouldn't go unnoticed. China and Country H each sent a commentator to explain the match online. But even so, all the procedures followed the international rules. This meant that it wasn't an ordinary solo match. Even though they were separated by the internet, they could still feel the tension in the room. Nervous. The netizen laughed. RCK was still live streaming yesterday. He didn't seem nervous at all. The opponent should be nervous, hahaha. I heard it's a girl. A girl's ability is limited when it comes to gaming. Don't cry when you get killed. You don't understand. China likes to do such things. Even esports relies on one's face. Who knows how she got there? Get CK to be gentler when he attacks. That's how we show our might. He doesn't have to be gentle to win. You guys don't know how the Chinese chased after CK. It seems like the fans know who to support. Isn't it always the style of the Chinese? Ha ha ha, I'm going there to earn some money. There would always be comments during the live stream. Perhaps some people would find it strange. However, there were indeed some girls spamming the names of their idols crazily. They had completely forgotten that this was a battle between China and country H. While they were cheering for CK, they didn't forget to say, even if they compete, they will only embarrass China. They won't be able to beat CK. I really don't understand why she's so strong. Her skills are terrible. Does she want to be famous? I don't know. Anyway, I'm here to see my CK. I feel that he has become cuter. It was in such a situation that it was possible. Shui Yaoyao sat in front of the computer, checking the mouse and keyboard one last time. Someone else said, Supreme Alliance is past its prime. That Spadesy dragged a bunch of people down, and now he's leaving. If you ask me, Supreme Alliance deserves it. They didn't give us an explanation, and just fired him. Since he's still in the team, let's see if we can still support him. Supreme Alliance has reached its limit. Otherwise, why would they let Shui Yaoyao compete? There's nothing special about her at all. Anyone who watched the live stream could basically see these comments. The club was filled with huge screens. It was more realistic. Lin Feng clenched his fists, coughing continuously. He wanted to rush over, but he knew that it was better to be quiet. What are you going to do? Yin, who tilted his head, probably worried that he wouldn't be able to control his temper. There were so many people waiting outside the club, waiting for news from Supreme Alliance. Regardless of what it was, it would be a scandal. Lin Feng turned his gaze deep. I'm going to smoke. That's right, he could only smoke at this moment. I'm worried that Yaoyao will collapse. He had been scolded before. In esports, if you played well, people would praise you. Wow, what an amazing almighty. If you didn't play well, people would say how old you were, and that you should retire as soon as possible. How embarrassing. In reality, they wanted to win more than anyone else. Lin Feng couldn't forget that year when their captain wasn't around. Because he couldn't adjust his mentality, after one mistake he had made a series of mistakes. In the end, he couldn't even see the comments on the screen. Because he had lost. As long as you lost, there was no meaning in a competition. Lin Feng stood in the corridor, his hands trembling when he lit his cigarette. Yin, who walked over, lowered his head, and touched the cigarette he had lit. Then he leaned against the wall like him. Sometimes you underestimate a girl's tenacity. They are braver than us in certain aspects. It was rare for Yin Hu to say so many words. Lin Feng smoked, not saying a word. Both of them knew that whoever sat in that room would have to bear this pressure. Professional esports players only looked glamorous on the surface. There was 1 minute left before the game would start. The players had a chance to speak to the team. Many people thought that Yin Huin Wu Yao, or Feng Yi, would be the one guiding Yao Yao's tactics. But at this moment, Feng Yi stood up, gesturing to the other side to pause the call. Then he connected the call. When he was doing this, he was still dressed in a suit, looking like an ace manager. Just as everyone was still confused about what was happening, a voice suddenly came from beside her ear. Suddenly, she heard a voice. It was the voice of a teenager, with a hint of laziness but as clear as water. It calmed Shui Yaoyao's racing heart. Yaoyao. Chapter 1170. Spadesy. Almost all of Spadesy's fans could tell whose voice it was. Ever since that incident, no one had seen her again. Those who truly liked Spadesy didn't care if the youngster was a man or a woman. The reason they had fallen in love with Spadesy was because she had broken so many things. Before this, many people would say that only those who had undergone training were fit to play professionally. Many people didn't care about the truly skilled streamers, because they were just for entertainment. Those who came from unorthodox ways wouldn't be acknowledged. But Spadesy had rushed out from the crowd. Why was she liked? Because when they watched her play, they would think of themselves. In the past, when they had just started playing, they hadn't known anything. They had even foolishly gotten excited when they had killed the first person. They were all the same, ordinary players. But in Spadesy, they saw the dream that they had wanted to have but didn't dare to have. One day, I will become a professional gamer. This was a level that anyone who liked to play games wanted to reach. They had watched as Spadesy took the FC in Zone C again and again, breaking new records time and time again. Then she went to the qualifiers, the city-level competition, the revival competition, and the National League. They had been there for every competition. They had watched as that person charged into the blood pool alone, watched as that person was splashed with coke, watched as that person lost and won again. Many of them had forgotten that if it hadn't been for this youngster, Supreme Alliance wouldn't have reached this stage. The almighty Z they liked was a girl. So what? She was still herself, the one who had always broken the rules, telling everyone that when choosing a profession, one shouldn't decide if it was suitable based on one's background. FC King. The moment these three words appeared, Spadesy's fans seemed to have a tacit understanding as they started to flood the screen. They were all calling the same name, Almighty Z. It wasn't the big Spade from before, it was Almighty Z. I miss you, come back. Honestly, without Spadesy, the competition isn't as thrilling as it used to be. Indeed. Of course, there were people who would scold her. There were people who told Bojio to scram, saying that she wasn't fit to appear, and that she shouldn't be a burden to Supreme Alliance. However, the young man didn't seem to notice any of this. Shui Yaoyao, who was wearing headphones, paused. She could only feel her face getting a little hot from excitement. If there weren't so many spectators watching, she would definitely ask where Highness Jio was now, why he didn't even go to school, and why he couldn't find him with his phone turned off. But it was not the right time to ask. The person on the other end of the line didn't wait for her to speak, his voice as usual. Before the glory, we have to accept the embarrassment and difficulties in front of us. Only then will some people know that Supreme Alliance doesn't just have Qin Mo, Rao Rong, Yun Huin Wu Yao, and Yu Yao Yao. The final landing spot made Shui Yaoyao's heart skip a beat. Lin Feng and Yun Hu couldn't help but laugh when they heard the commotion. At this moment, Bojio asked, "Are you ready?" Shui Yaoyao's eyes were red, but she smiled and agreed. "Then let's go." It was just like what the Almighty would say at the start of every match. Now that Bojio had said it, it was calm, but it wasn't easy. It was enough to make one forget everything else and focus on the outcome. He had to win the match. Yes, he had to win. The call ended. In an instant, only the sound of Shui Yaoyao logging into the game could be heard. On the other side, CK seemed to be sloppy, interacting with his fans nonchalantly. But he was a professional after all. Before this, he had seen the information of Supreme Alliance's contestant. Frankly speaking, she was just slightly better than ordinary players. Her hand speed was fast, but esports wasn't all about hand speed. It was more about awareness and control. Moreover, she had played as a sorcerer and was more of an auxiliary player. Her understanding of the character wasn't as good as his. CK entered the game. He had already thought of a strategy. He would press the line and crush the opponent. It wasn't a problem at all. It seems like both parties have chosen their characters. The shoutcaster started to synchronize. When he saw the screen, he revealed a shocked expression. Supreme Alliance's contestant has chosen an auxiliary character. It seems like the competition system has weakened her considerably. She doesn't even understand the character? The other shoutcaster shook his head. It's too dangerous. There was a huge disparity in their skills, and now she had chosen a weakened character. Could she still fight? CK lifted the corners of his lips when he saw Shui Yaoyao's character. His eyes filled with mockery. A third-rate player was indeed a third-rate player. 5 minutes. When he typed these words, the others didn't understand what he meant. CK's fans were already spamming the screen crazily. He's so handsome, my idol. Can it end in 5 minutes? Cool. CK won't even need 5 minutes to beat her. It's a one-sided abuse. This competition isn't interesting. This wasn't an official competition, it was just a solo. CK didn't have to worry about the situation. Their captain had reminded him. But everyone knew that in the Asian season, their results were obvious to all. It wasn't a big deal to be impudent at this moment. CK thought about it, moving his mouse to clear the players. Both of them chose the middle lane? That's how solo matches are. Let's see who gets the first kill. Solo matches were basically decided by the first kill. Both of them were playing as auxiliary characters. Their tempo wasn't that fast. But CK said that it would end in 5 minutes. It might really end in 5 minutes. The shoutcaster looked at the situation on the screen. They are being suppressed. CK's positioning and dodging are outstanding. The outcome is obvious. But watching two auxiliary players in a solo match wasn't as satisfying as watching an assassin. It was obvious that CK was much faster than Shui Yaoyao. Not only that, Shui Yaoyao had been hit and her HP had dropped. Her positioning is too slow. I really don't understand how she managed to become a professional player. I say, you guys already know the outcome. Why are you so bothered? Shui Yaoyao moved her mouse, as though she hadn't noticed her mistake, turning her body to attack the minions. Just like that, the match was so peaceful that it made people feel bored. The shoutcaster could only give a simple explanation. Let's take a look at the matchup between the two sides. If nothing out of the ordinary happens, both of them have chosen to face each other in the middle lane. But it's obvious that compared to CK's mechanics, our beautiful Yaoyao's movements seem a little fatigued. In such a situation, she can only clear the minions at the bottom of the tower. Honestly speaking, this doesn't look like a solo match at all. Luckily, their finances aren't that different. Their finances aren't that different, right? It looks like CK is suppressing her. That's why I find it weird. I can only say that this girl is tenacious. God, CK should have jumped the tower and killed her. I think so too, probably because the equipment isn't out yet. Let's wait a little longer. But there was a problem. Some viewers who were watching the live stream realized this. That was time. Why does it feel like a long time has passed? It's been 4 minutes, right? God, CK isn't that slow usually. It is. 5 minutes later. People started to re-evaluate the match. They couldn't bring up the pace. What was going on? Even CK furrowed his brows, holding onto the mouse with one hand. He wasn't in a good mood since he hadn't expected it to be so slow. Yaoyao's support character is specially chosen to counter CK's expertise. Rao Rong looked at the match on the screen and suddenly laughed. He was as calm as the wind, his voice faint. Our sister Yaoyao's tactics are interesting? Lin Feng arched a brow. You like it? Even if you do, it won't be yours. Shut up, almighty Lin Feng. Take a look at your recovery. You need to use your brain when playing games. Rao Rong's voice and his words were completely different. Lin Feng's eyes widened. This person had only joined their team for a few days, and he was already in this state? Moreover, it felt good to be called Almighty Lin Feng by the Almighty. The naive girl automatically ignored his mocking tone. And not just use your brain. Feng Shang spoke up, his face flushed adorably as he stuttered. Feng Shang spoke up, his face blushing adorably as he stuttered. Yaoyao, in order to practice her support, she spent a lot of time. She had watched so many videos and analyzed so many skills. She had even created a table specifically for each character's skills. And that person, CK, which support was his expertise. He woke up earlier than everyone else and slept later than everyone else. Even Feng Shang couldn't count how many times he had seen Yaoyao sleeping on the chair in the internet cafe after the National League. She would always have to wait for Uncle Ian to wake her up before she would pat her face and head to the washroom to wash her face before returning to her seat to continue her research. Countless battles and manipulations of skills. The club also had to train, but with the intensity of the training, even he wouldn't be able to endure it. Yaoyao really wanted to win. Regarding the solo match, Feng Shang lifted his head, looking at the character on the screen. CK was obviously getting impatient. He waved his mouse, intending to launch his strongest attack. Even as a support, there was damage output. Moreover, his support was a tank. He had a natural advantage, and could push forward with his minions. It was obvious that Yaoyao was at a disadvantage, especially with her low HP. It wasn't safe for her to stand at the bottom of the tower. The sound of CK clicking his mouse sped up. The two commentators who were watching the match from God's perspective pressed down on their headphones, straightening their backs. It's coming. Chapter 1171. What is CK trying to do? People looked at the movements in the video and leaned closer to the computer screen. The expressions on their faces showed how excited they were. F***ck, it can't be. Tower kill. Even Feng Shang couldn't sit still, standing up abruptly. CK's character had already entered the tower. Using the advantage of the minions, he dealt damage to Shui Yaoyao and slowed her down with a skill. He won. This was the prediction of the netizens. Almost all of CK's fans were there. But in the next second, flash. The shoutcaster's voice came from the earpiece. Shui Yaoyao's movement is very clever. But it didn't seem to be of any use. CK had already walked to the middle of the two towers, meaning that he was going to kill her. CK didn't want to drag it any longer. 5 minutes had passed and he couldn't even defeat a girl. It would be a humiliation to him if word got out. Moreover, this girl was just an online gamer. How could an ordinary gamer compare to him? Yaoyao run. The instant the bullet screen popped up, Shui Yaoyao turned around. Shui Yaoyao turned around and used her ultimate move. That's right, big move. Marked damage and had a speed reduction function. This was the highlight of Shui Yaoyao's support skill. At the start of the match, the shoutcaster was right. This character had been weakened in this season. But it wasn't that she couldn't fight. CK was a support, so he wasn't afraid of slow damage. It was just that the speed reduction was troublesome. He frowned, leaning to the left, waiting for the skill to recover. But at this time, the support that he had been chasing for some reason just now accelerated and rushed towards him. Courting death? CK tapped with his finger, wanting to continue his attack. But at this moment, he realized that he was out of mana and only had one skill left. F***ck. CK hurriedly retreated. But he had used up his flash when he was chasing after the person. At that time, he had thought that he could kill her. But he had only forced her to use her flash. CK's right hand slid the mouse. His position was too unfavorable, in the middle of the two towers. If he leaned a little, he would be attacked by the tower. Even as a support, CK didn't have enough HP. But if he didn't, he would fall into the opponent's big move. In less than 3 seconds, CK chose to avoid the delayed critical strike of the electric circle skill. He was unavoidably hit by the tower twice, leaving him with only a little HP. CK turned around and entered the bushes at the side. He planned to leave through the river. This way, he would definitely disappear from the enemy's attack range. At this point, everyone was well aware of the opponent's mana consumption. He was out of mana and couldn't recover his skills. Even if his opponent had mana, she wouldn't be much better off. At most, she would be a little stronger than him. With that support, what else could she do without her ultimate skills? CK floated through the grass, Shui Yaoyao chasing after him. This girl is really stupid. Doesn't she know that she can't chase after the support tank? Maybe it's because I want to kill too much. I'm like that sometimes too, and this is a rare opportunity. I don't have enough critical hits, and I don't have any ultimate moves. I can't kill it. The shoutcasters thought so too. Moreover, when Shui Yaoyao was chasing, she didn't even hit the target because she lost her vision. It was even more impossible. If she continued to chase, she might get into trouble. Chapter 1172. Feng Shang clenched his fists anxiously. Lin Feng lifted the corners of his lips, turning towards Yin Hu. Do you think Sister Yao is going to? Before Lin Feng could finish his sentence, Shui Yaoyao sped up, moving behind the wall. She didn't throw the skill towards the bushes, instead, she flattened the tyrant. CK, who had intended to counterattack, was about to make his move when Shui Yaoyao flattened him. The tyrant leaped up, pulling all the aggro onto CK through the wall. With a swipe of its claws, CK was sent flying. Yaoyao was indeed out of mana, but she didn't need any more skills. She just needed a click of the mouse. A crisp sound rang out. KO. First kill. The competition was won. Almost everyone looked at this scene in disbelief. The shoutcaster was speechless. Not to mention CK himself, he was completely dumbfounded. Tyrant. She actually used the tyrant. That move is awesome. Big Spade must have used that move before. It's a familiar scene, let's feel sorry for CK. Almighty Z isn't around but her skills are still there. Even though she's handsome, she's really sinister, too sinister. The pop-up messages lit up the screen in an instant. Someone even sent her a plane. Shui Yaorao sat there, watching the word victory appear on the screen. Only then did she feel that she had won, her palms sweating as she held onto the mouse. The team members behind her had already rushed over. Lin Feng pressed his hand on her head. Yao Yao, you've become sinister. You're drawing aggro like little blackhead. But it's fine. Our team is the most sinister team, ha 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 ha. The audience in front of the computer. They had never seen someone insult their own team so much, their hearts aching for Almighty Yun. Coco's way of expressing his joy was the most direct, reaching out to carry Shui Yao Yao, almost kissing her as though she was his rabbit. Fortunately, Feng Shang grabbed his hand. What are you doing? Yao Yao is a girl. I forgot in excitement. Why are you so nervous? Coco paused, realizing that the person in his arms was a little soft. He let go, smiling cutely. Yao Yao, we won. Yes, he had won. He could finally represent Huaxia. This time, they finally persevered to the end. Shui Yao Yao was also very happy, her face red. Was it because she was too young that there was no difference between a man and a woman at this moment? Everyone wanted to give Shui Yao Yao a hug. What exactly was he insisting on? It was probably because he didn't want to let go of any opportunity. Even if there were rumors everywhere, he still wanted to move forward towards what he wanted. Everyone was cheering. On CK's side, his face had turned green. It was obvious that he wasn't satisfied with this match, but a match was a match. In a solo, it was always about the first drop of blood. However, CK was not a petty opponent. He only left a message on the screen. See you at the Asian Cup. The commentator was still explaining the review of the match when the people on the other side had already gone offline. A portion of the fans had also turned off their computers. Even though many people thought that Shui Yao Yao's victory was just a fluke. But that didn't affect Supreme Alliance's celebration. Feng Yi walked over, raising his hand to check the time on his watch. I still have a meeting, think about what to eat tonight. Let's have a good celebration. They had obtained the qualification for the Asian Cup, but they weren't sure if that person would be back. And Little Spade, Feng Yi was a secretive person, he wouldn't reveal things easily. Chapter 1173. There was one good thing. Supreme Alliance didn't disperse. That meant there was a chance. Feng Yi pushed the glasses on his face, looking very shrewd at this moment. Shui Yao Yao took the opportunity to walk over. Her first thought was to tell His Highness Jiao about her victory. Call back. Feng Yi paused, then shook his head. I can't. Shui Yao Yao stilled, not saying a word. Feng Yi glanced at her, turning to light a cigarette. After taking 2 puffs, he said, This time Little Spade contacted me. Yao Yao, it is highly possible that Little Spade won't be coming back for the competition. Even though it might affect your morale, it isn't a bad thing for you to know about it. Prepare for the Asian Cup seriously, and don't think too much about it. Shui Yao Yao thought about it. I still have to wait for her to come back. Feng Yi's smoking hand paused and he smiled slowly. All right. It was just a word. It didn't matter if it was expectation. Regardless of when it was. When they turned back to look at the empty seat in the middle, there would always be a feeling of emptiness in their hearts. At that moment, they would always think about what it would be like when the two of them were there. The clicking sound of the mouse was heard in the club for a long time. But there was no longer the youngster who liked to turn over and help you adjust the computer settings. Shui Yao Yao glanced up. She believed that it wasn't just her. Everyone was waiting for the two of them, including their boss Feng. After the competition, Shui Yao Yao had to pack up. Since it was a live broadcast, she had to do a small platform Q&A session. There was a car parked outside the club. It was a top-notch car on the list, especially the color dark purple. The smooth lines made it look expensive. That car often appeared in some reports, and most of the time, it was always related to some female celebrity, which meant that there wasn't a single person in Jiang City who didn't know this car. The Jiang family. The driver sat in the front, seemingly waiting for someone. He tilted his head to take a look, muttering to himself, "Why isn't young master out yet?" In fact, young master rarely watched such competitions. Moreover, it wasn't a large-scale competition, It was a live broadcast. Even the arena was very small. The driver didn't understand why young master would go there. Could it be because of Miss? Thinking of this, a smile appeared on the driver's face. It would be great if it was because of the young mistress. The new madam had always been worried that the young master would dislike them, and the atmosphere in the house was never good. Indeed, young master used to dislike young miss no matter how he looked at her. But things were different now. The driver rolled down the window a little more. Inside the club building, the atmosphere at the scene was very lively. After all, Shui Yaorao had won the match, so this was considered her home ground. However, there was one person sitting there. His entire body seemed to be frozen. There was no expression on his face. His eyes swept over the screen once again. It's playing back. Apart from the match just now, the replay also showed the scene of Shui Yaoyao being hugged and kissed after the match. In the video, the two of them were wearing the same uniform, pure black with the Supreme Alliance logo. They looked at each other and smiled. There was a lot of other content. How many times had she seen Coco beside her? The young master of the Wendy group was said to be an illegitimate child. None of the people Chinemo had poached seemed simple, but that was not the main point. Chapter 1174. Jiangzhou clearly remembered that he had followed his father's instructions to bring her home for the festival. After all, it was the Mid-Autumn Festival. There was no reason not to have a reunion at home. He took time off to sleep, and even moved the meeting to the next morning. But she told him that she had something to do that day and was busy. Jiangzhou didn't mind since he was only completing his mission alone. When he returned home, the atmosphere wasn't right. Perhaps those people thought that he wasn't willing to fetch her. But the festival went on as usual. But there was more food on the table that she liked to eat. Jiangzhou thought about it and took the food. He wanted to send it to her place. He would occasionally see news about this and knew that she was practicing to qualify for the Asian Cup. But who would have thought that before he drove into her neighborhood, he would see her sitting on a bench by the roadside, looking up at the sky, deep in thought. She looked a little lost. Just as he was about to get out of the car, he saw someone walk past her hand. The two seemed to have made an appointment. The person smiled and iced her with his hand. Then he handed her an ice cream cone. It looked like they were on a date. She sat in the same position. Even her face was flushed. He could hear her laughter. Coco, thank you. If it wasn't for you, I would have spent the festival alone pitifully. When she said this, Coco even reached out to stroke the stray hair beside her ear, saying something like, "As long as you're happy." Then the two of them sat together and went to play with a passing cat. They smiled and knew each other very well. At that moment, Jiangzhou's grip on the steering wheel tightened bit by bit before gradually releasing it. In the end, he didn't get out of the car or say a word. Instead, he took the opportunity when the red and green traffic lights changed to turn the car in another direction. That day, even he himself didn't know why, but he was very irritated. What did he mean by spending the festival alone pitifully? She was the one who didn't want to go home. The more Jiangzhou wanted to control himself, the more he recalled the past. That soft fatty would always appear in front of him. He was so irritable that he wanted to argue with his father. And when he was unhappy on the anniversary of his mother's death, she was always there, sitting beside him and listening to him talk about those things. She didn't argue or make a fuss. Every time she saw him, she would be. That was why he had never exposed the fact that she liked him. He had seen that kind of gaze too many times. Of course, he knew what the other party was thinking. He did not intend to respond. Firstly, it was because he had never thought of dating while he was in school. Secondly, all his energy was focused on fighting against his father. He didn't refuse the man's care and the breakfast that was brought over. Jiangzhou was well aware that everyone had their eyes on his face. But at that time it was a very ordinary thing. Now that he thought about it, it always made him uncomfortable. At first, it was because her mother walked into their house. Even now, he couldn't tell what was wrong with him. Just by sitting there and looking at the screen, he felt that it was blinding, especially after she was picked up and smiled. In the end, he could no longer sit still. He must be crazy. He didn't even rest and came to watch a live solo. He was probably afraid that Qin Mo's team would lose. But his footsteps seemed to be fixed in place. Chapter 1175. Even though he stood up, many people around him had already shifted their gazes over, including some reporters. Only her attention was on Coco's face. In the past, she had mentioned that she liked younger brothers. Was this the type? Jiang Zhuo scoffed, his voice cold. He picked up his phone and walked to the passageway without turning back. But for some reason, he was still frustrated. He didn't want to go home with such emotions, in case there was a group of people guarding against him. To be fair, he had always felt that his father had betrayed his mother. That promise of never marrying into the family was already enough. Jiang Zhuo knew that it wasn't appropriate for Mama Shui to take the blame. Over the years, his father had been involved in many affairs outside, but he had never brought them home. Mama Shui was the first. She even married into a prestigious family. Jiang Zhuo didn't know how to describe his feelings. Betrayal was his first reaction. As for the rest, this marriage wasn't balanced to begin with. That person had long known that his mother would marry into the family, but hadn't said a word to him. Was it because all the fawning she had done in the past so that she could marry into the family and become his younger sister earlier? After all, the Jiang family was rich. That was indeed his initial thought. But after spending so much time together and seeing the atmosphere in the family, he gradually understood that Mama Shui wasn't that kind of person. It wasn't that she didn't take anything, but she wasn't greedy. When his father was drunk, she would cook noodles in the kitchen and never buy anything from his father, probably because she was worried that he would be angry. Once she married into the family, she signed an agreement that her youngest son wouldn't have a share of the assets. Actually, Jiang Zhuo didn't care about the assets, it was obvious. He had long left the Jiang family's sphere of influence, and even his personal assets were larger than the Jiang family's. But she seemed to be worried that he would do this. She had even specially told him that her brother was still young and had never thought about this aspect, asking him not to send her brother overseas. This person never seemed to understand the situation. There were some words that should be said to his father, not to him. Going overseas to further his studies and he didn't like it? Sometimes, Jiang Zhuo really didn't know what she was thinking. Forget it, it didn't matter. Just as Jiang Zhuo was about to leave, he saw Shui Yaoyao. Shui Yaoyao saw him too. She had just come out from the interview, the heat still burning on her face. She was indeed happy after winning the competition. But Shui Yaoyao hadn't expected to see him here. The Jiang family shouldn't have invested in esports. Was he waiting for her? Shui Yaoyao paused and was about to walk. A chuckle came from the other side. Young Master Jiang. It was a female broadcaster. Recently, she had been very popular on the internet. She was different from the others. Whether it was her looks or her style, she was very fairy-like. She was a beauty blogger. She was beautiful even when she was simple and elegant. That was probably why she attracted so many fans. Shui Yaoyao seemed to have understood something. She felt that if she went over now, she would probably disturb him, so she decided to wait here. The female streamer walked past her. She even had a nice fragrance. It wasn't very strong, but it was faint. It seemed to be his taste. Jiang. Chapter 1176. It should be a blessing to be liked by such a girl. And the two of them looked like a good match. Actually, after Shui Yaoyao had calmed down, she felt that he seemed to be very casual when it came to finding girlfriends. Or perhaps he had never acknowledged who was the real deal, and had never put in any feelings, which was why he had always been like this. That was probably the reason. The girl today was worthy of being called a fairy. Shui Yaoyao thought that perhaps he would end his promise with her earlier. After all, that promise wasn't about self-respect no matter how she looked at it. Even if there was a girl he liked, he probably wouldn't want to mention it again. Shui Yaoyao looked up and landed her gaze on that face. That person was still so handsome that even the starry sky outside seemed to lose its color. He was different from the Almighty. Although they grew up together, their personalities were different. This person always gave people a cold feeling. Even when he smiled, he looked like a playboy. But looking at his side profile, there was something else. Because he probably didn't notice her. He turned his head, his long fingers flicking the cigarette ash, his voice carrying a smile. What's up? The female streamer was direct. I always wanted to find a chance to treat you to a meal. To thank young Master Jiang for helping me out last time. No need. It was two simple words, but his voice floated towards her. Shui Yaoyao felt that it wasn't a good place for her to stand. The middle of the corridor was too obvious. Most importantly, in her current position, she could neither retreat nor advance. He probably noticed someone else's presence. The female streamer looked in her direction, her lips curved into a smile, her face as white as water. It's an esports player from our company. He just won a match. He's amazing. Young Master Jiang, do you know him? Shui Yaoyao didn't expect that she would become the topic of conversation. At this point, she could only walk over. Wearing her uniform, she was much braver than before. Brother. Yes, when Shui Yaoyao called out that word, she didn't have any barriers anymore. But Shui Yaoyao wasn't sure if he was willing to acknowledge her as his sister. As expected, when she called out, his handsome face was expressionless. His handsome face was expressionless as he turned to look at her. His eyes were so deep that it made her heart palpitate. Brother? The female streamer's beautiful eyes widened, as if she had found out a secret. Even her expression became animated. Yaoyao, are you young Master Jiang's sister? Shui Yaoyao smiled, thinking that it was best not to answer. On the other hand, a bone-chilling voice came from the other side. Not a blood relative. Oh. The female streamer smiled. She had never heard of the Jiang family having a daughter. Shui Yaoyao was used to his denial. He didn't feel anything. She felt like she was unnecessary by just standing there. Coupled with the playful expression on the female host's face, Shui Yaoyao blushed. Luckily, there was no one around. He wanted to leave but couldn't find a suitable excuse or opportunity. It was a very delicate situation. Shui Yaoyao thought that if they continued talking, she would take the chance to slip away. If she wanted to get out, she had to go in that direction. If she went in this direction, she would be retreating. Chapter 1177. Right at this moment, a figure appeared in front of them. A silhouette appeared in front of her. Before his face could be seen, his voice was heard. Yaoyao, how long do you want us to wait for you? Come quickly. It was Coco in his battle uniform. Probably because it was winter, he was afraid of the cold and had a scarf around his neck, making his face even more beautiful. Originally, Coco had only wanted to greet her, but after seeing so many people, he paused and walked over. He arched a brow, as though asking, what's going on? Shui Yaoyao reacted quickly, as though she had found her savior. She held onto the cat-like youngster's arm. Did you wait too long? In fact, they interacted like this in the team, as close as siblings. Nonsense, I'm starving. If you don't believe me, listen to my stomach. When Coco pouted, he didn't look annoying, instead he looked cute. But I told them to wait for you, everyone is outside now. Shui Yaoyao turned to Jiang Zhua. Then we'll leave first. With that she paused. Have fun. The last 5 words were directed at the female caster. She smiled elegantly, the beauty of a Jiangnan girl, full of immortality. Okay, bye. On the other hand, Jiang Zhua was expressionless and cold, as though he hadn't heard her. Regardless, it was good that she left. This was Shui Yaoyao's first breath of relief after leaving. Coco frowned. Why do you look as though you were a third wheel? Are they dating? She'll lower your voice. Shui Yaoyao replied. I'm not sure. But there weren't many people who could make that person wait for them. Coco shook his head. The company signed a contract. New female casters aren't allowed to date for half a year. They aren't even allowed to date? Shui Yaoyao arched a brow. That's a little overbearing. Coco was smart now. Fox Feng set the contract. If he hears you, you don't have to eat. Yaoyao. Coco pressed the elevator button as he said. Moreover, these beauty bloggers are all signed by internet celebrities, while some are recruited by their managers from schools. There are all kinds of them, but the only thing they have in common is their good looks. After all, they aren't game streamers, and the fans like them because they are single. This kind of contract exists in every company that promotes internet celebrities, and it's based on market demand. Unless it's a very unique type of internet celebrity, like my goddess, every video she releases becomes a classic. These kinds of people who rely on their looks to get into a relationship. I haven't even dated one yet. The last sentence should be the main point. Shui Yaoyao could hear the perfect resentment in his voice. She smiled and said, "You can find one." "That won't do. If I find one, what about my wives who watch me play games? They'll cry." Coco said as if it was true. Hearing this, Shui Yaoyao's heart sank. So those people still can't accept that Her Highness Jiao is a girl because of this. Destroying their yearning for their male idol. Chapter 1178. Yes. The problem now was that Highness Jiao didn't seem to have any intention of returning. It was said that he had gone overseas to film a movie. But ever since the video was released, Shui Yaoyao didn't know why, but she had a feeling that she would never be able to see that figure in the esports arena again. Because it was obvious that when the video was released, there was a sense of farewell. Moreover, Highness Jiao couldn't be contacted at all. Shui Yaoyao's gaze followed the elevator lights. She didn't notice anything else. Jiangzhua, who was still standing in the long corridor, gripped his phone tightly. There wasn't a single reply to the message he sent. The female caster was still standing beside him, her smile still on her face. "Young Master Jiang, do you want to walk around my workplace?" He had helped her previously at the table, and seemed to be very interested in their club. This time, she had the chance to be alone. The female caster had to admit that she had long been moved. She knew that he liked her type, so naturally, she had to grab the opportunity. But she hadn't expected that he wouldn't give her any face at all. He only said one word, "No." Then he walked toward the elevator. It wasn't a good time for her to strike up a conversation. There were other casters coming over. Rather than letting everyone notice him, it was better for her to take a step back. Some of them liked to snatch investors, so she had to guard against them. Shui Yaoyao's perception was actually wrong. Even if the other party was full of immortal air, he was still immortal. Everyone would think the same when they met someone they liked. There wasn't much difference. After Jiangzhua entered the elevator, the smile on his face disappeared completely. It was as though there was a heavy object pressing down on his chest. It was only when he walked out of the elevator that the heavy object on his chest seemed to be removed. But there was still no response from his phone. The message he sent was like a stone sinking into the ocean. Did that person not see it, or did he want to be with someone else, so he didn't even reply? 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Jiangzhua stood there, his phone still silent. He walked to the main entrance. After all, he had sent her a message to wait for him there. But obviously she wasn't there. There were many fans walking back and forth, and the surrounding people were all discussing the competition. "I think it was a fluke." "I don't think so. Think about it carefully." Shui Yaoyao's teleportation, her ability to predict CK's position, and the timing of the Tyrant King are all very accurate. This isn't something anyone can do. I have a feeling that Shui Yaoyao might have predicted CK's character this time. In this game, there are many supports, but there are only 2 that can counter them. Although Shui Yaoyao's support has been weakened this season, it can still counter the support. "I don't understand what you're talking about, but it's good that you won. In the past, I always felt that she was just a decoration in Supreme Alliance." 23333. You should have heard Almighty Z's call. Everyone has their own role in the team. Don't underestimate even the smallest support. I realized why you're always insulting me today. Because I play support too. To be honest, I'm a fan of Shui Yaoyao. She has finally found her place in Supreme Alliance. Don't you think that after seeing her, you want to work harder? Chapter 1179. When he heard the 2 passers-by discussing the last sentence. For no reason, Jiangzhua wasn't in a good mood. It was probably because the temperature outside was getting colder. It didn't feel like summer anymore. Even the air was filled with haze. Jiangzhua didn't wear much when he came. hence he felt the chill. As he listened to their discussion, his eyes deepened. Then his phone rang. Jiang's finally moved, but when he saw the WeChat profile picture, his breath turned colder. Young Master Jiang, are you cold standing outside? Do you need me to send you some clothes? We have some clothes in the live stream room, some for boys. Jiang's didn't take a second look and closed the WeChat message. The female caster was disappointed because she was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window on the 3rd floor and could see what was happening below. But she didn't give up. After all, she had been able to add this person's WeChat because of her work. The temperature outside was getting colder. In fact, it hadn't been long since Jiang's sent the message. But this time, Jiang's lost all his patience. With a cold expression, he stuffed his phone into his pocket and walked in the direction of the car. The driver was surprised to see his young master return alone. After all, he was here to meet Missy and bring her home. Why was he alone? But as a driver who had been with the Jiang family for many years, he knew what he should and shouldn't ask. It was still noisy outside. Even if it was a small-scale solo competition, there would be a group of people watching. Most of them were young. After all, Hero was much younger than Final Fantasy and standalone CS. It was normal for there to be some noise. Jiang's turned a deaf ear to all of this, including the names of the 2 people. He leaned against the back of the seat and tugged at his collar, allowing Uncle Wang to drive. At this location and time, there would definitely be a jam. The car couldn't move and could only wait for someone to pass first. Under such circumstances, Jiang's rolled down the window. He wanted to take a breather, but he inadvertently glanced at the 2 people in uniform not far away. In an instant, he didn't know what was going on. His heart suddenly ached. It wasn't that she didn't have time to reply to his message, but she probably didn't want to. After all, she had never acted like this in front of her. She turned her face sideways and put the earphones in the boy's ears. The 2 of them listened to one phone and stood there casually, giving people a sense of intimacy. He could even see her lowering her head and smiling. Her face was still red as she reached out and tucked her stray hair behind her ear. Jiang's wuxia subconsciously clenched his fists. At the crossroads, the traffic lights changed. There were people coming and going, and the car could not leave. Shui Yaoyao saw Jiang's sitting in the car. He seemed to be incompatible with her, and even his bones were permeated with a noble aura. He sat in the back seat with his usual casual posture, just like when he appeared in front of her again after he learned that her mother would marry into the Jiang family. He also sat like this, giving off a feeling of superiority. However, he had the capital to be high and mighty. The driver was still Uncle Wang. Uncle Wang also noticed her. Shui Yaoyao was walking away. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.